Right, we've worked on hips, we've worked on upper back, thoracic spine. Time to focus on the final piece, which is core stability. Now, this is where a lot of people don't understand the point of core training. A lot of people think, oh, Bruce Lee did 1,000 sit-ups a day, and that's how he got a six-pack. And there's just a lot to unpack there with how wrong that statement is, and how we just don't go about things the proper way about spot reduction, and completely missing the boat on nutrition, being of course a very important piece on level of being lean, body composition and whatnot. But try to push all of that aside, all the preconceived notions that you might have. The core's one primary function is to generate stiffness and tension so that we can move our limbs. Now, we especially see this in athletics when someone is swinging a baseball bat, throwing a punch or a kick, jumping, running, anything explosive. The core will generate stiffness in the trunk so that we can move our limbs explosively. Now, in our activities of daily living, the core does that for everything else as well. When you're bending down to pick something up, when you're opening a fridge door, when you are squatting. In the gym, obviously, when you're lifting weights, which is to be expected, but then also when you're walking, when we're generating that stiffness in the core while we are swinging our arms and legs in front of us in our gait cycle and when we're walking. So that's what I want you to really think about here. And now this is going to be a little bit of a different emphasis versus earlier when I told you I want you to really relax into the position and really stretch and melt into the floor. Now, what I want you to think about is when we're doing these movements that I'm about to show you, I want you to generate intra-abdominal pressure, essentially stiffness in your core while you're moving your limbs in these other movements. And there's a lot of misinformation out there. A lot of people think, oh, it means I need to suck my stomach in, aka the stomach vacuum that was popularized by the bodybuilders, which is still very much popular now, but more so like kind of the 60s, 70s, 80s, the golden era of bodybuilding. I'll save that whole topic for another conversation. But the problem is that is not that while that's the look of being thinner and making ourselves, your abdominals more defined, and it's an aesthetic that people are going for on stage. That is not what we're working on what we want to do when we want to generate core tension. If anything, it's the exact opposite of that, where I actually want you to push your belly button out and generate stiffness in your trunk. My favorite cue that I ever give to people is I want you to brace as if someone were about to punch you. You definitely wouldn't suck it in, aka the stomach vacuum. You would just brace. You'd bring the rib cage, you'd pull it down towards the belly button, you'd brace your abs, and you would generate that tightness. And that's what I want you to do while you're doing these movements. So when you're doing the different movements, I want you to think about bracing your abs as if you were going to get punched. Obviously, we're not going to do that for real because that's not very nice. But I want you to brace, and while you're bracing, that's when you're going to move your limbs in the various movements that we're going to do. Like, for instance, the bird dog, which I believe is the first movement in this series. So I want you to really think about using the core to generate stiffness in the trunk so that we can move our limbs. And what that's going to do is that's going to stabilize your spine, and that's going to give you that rigidity that you need to move your limbs and to protect your lower back and preserve it and spare it. Because when we don't do that, and the bird dog's a great example of this, which I'll go into in the demo video, when we don't generate that trunk stiffness, that core stiffness, we overcompensate with lumbar movement. People tend to start bending at the back versus moving with the hips and the shoulders. So there's a whole method to the madness, and this is where we're really bringing things together, because with that first movement, we're going to move your hip and we're going to move your upper back and your shoulder, while using the core to stiffen the trunk and to only have movement in those two limbs and not in your spine. So think about that as you're doing these movements. I want you to brace the core as you're moving and take your time. Don't be in a rush. I don't want you to do these movements as fast as you can. It's all about, again, generating that stiffness in your trunk while moving your limbs with these various positions. All right, let's get to it. All right, first up is the elbow side plank. What you're gonna do is assume this side plank position, lift the hip up off of the floor. And what I want you to really emphasize here is drive the elbow into the ground. That's gonna engage your lats, your obliques, and all those core muscles and help you stay stable. Hold this position for about 15 to 30 seconds. You can work yourself up to about a minute, and then that's the sweet spot where we're working on it. If that position is a little bit too challenging, then you can go from the knees, very similar to the push-up variation that people have heard of, where you're just gonna hold yourself up with the knees and the elbows being the 2 points of contact. Next up, we have the bird dog. This is one of the best movements for core stability. And what you're gonna do is you're gonna get on all fours, so knees under the hips, hands under the shoulders, and you're gonna brace the core, and then you're gonna extend opposite limbs out away from you, opposite arm, opposite leg away from you. The key here is we're gonna maintain core tension and tightness in the trunk while moving the limbs. We don't wanna go too far with the range of motion to where we can start arching the lower back. So maintain a flat back, neutral spine, move the limbs slowly, and take your time. Don't rush this. This is not about going as far as you can. It's about maintaining the structure while we're moving the limb. Remember, the core is generating stiffness while we're moving our limbs. So I always tell my clients when they're doing this to try to become a coffee table. If I were to set a coffee or a beverage on your back, it should stay there. All right, last one we have for you here is the hollow body hold. This is another fantastic core exercise, and it is also scalable from the beginner all the way up to the advanced lifter. What you're gonna do is start off on your back, knees are up off the floor, as well as the arms, hands are facing the ceiling. And then what you'll do is you're gonna raise your chest up off of the floor, squeeze your abs really hard, and think about the rib cage tucking in towards the belt buckle. As you get stronger in this position, extend your limbs out for more of a challenge.